In the last video, I talked about the basics of gods, cores, and souls, how they work and what they are. As a short recap, gods are by definition rocks at their core, and once they die, their shells wither until only their cores are left over. The god's core is the essence of their power. So now that I had that figured out, I started thinking, what if humans can take one of these god's cores and use it to carry out the supernatural/godly actions that the god was able to do during its life. For example, with the core of a god of lightning, a person might be able to summon lightning. With the core of a god of light, a person might be able to summon light. With the core of a god of strength, a person might be able to summon strength on themselves or others. I.e., what if I make a magic system where the source of magic is the cores of dead gods? And there are many gods, all of whom live and die just like people do. So there can be many different gods of the same thing, just regional ones or even two fighting over the same thing. So the magic system won't be limited to like the 3 people in the world who have a god core. There can potentially be no shortage of god cores for people to be able to use. It won't be the rarest thing for people to get access to god cores and learn to perform these supernatural actions, i.e. to cast magic spells. Now, I want the magic system to be hard because the Eushirish are a very literal and legalistic people. They analyze their religious texts to figure out the exact context things should be done. So similarly, they would do the same with their magic and figure out exactly how, when, where, and how much it works. And since any sufficiently advanced magic is indistinguishable from technology, I don't really want to use words like magic or spell, so I'm going to call spells actions and refer to the godly magic as power. The first thing to figure out is how to actually use the god core, how to command these actions. We can start by thinking about our own cores, our bones. Every action that we do requires us to use power from our cores. For example, when we raise our hands, we need to move our bones, and we can understand this core power as something like mana or energy or strength, where after doing many actions or a few powerful actions, we have to allow our body to recharge the core power before we can continue doing more. So that can be the source of the actions, and as for how we use this power to perform actions with our bones, we kinda just do it. There's no real process to command the core to perform an action. So then it makes sense that so too, to command a god core's power and perform some action with it, you should in theory just be able to just do it. The only difference is that your bones are a part of you and the god core isn't. So the next step is to figure out how to make the god core be part of you. Well, we can't really fuse it to us, but we can form a connection with it to allow us to take some power from our own cores, our bones, and to direct it to the god's cores, through it, and out, collecting the god core's power along the way, and then releasing it out with whatever action we want to perform. Now, how to make such a connection? You'll first need to make a connection from the god core to your core, and then from your core to the god core. For the connection from the god core to your core, if you remember from the previous video, milk is the true liquid that is the bridge between bones and air, and humans are considered to be made mostly of air. So because of this, in order to be able to link the godly core to your human core, you gotta use milk. The most common process is like this. You take the stone that is the god core and heat it up, and then once it's heated up, you put it into a cup of milk, such that this hot stone heats up the milk. As it inputs heat into the milk, it also thereby transfers some of its power into the milk. Then, once the milk is hot, you drink it, and when this milk that was heated up through the god core enters your body and reaches your bones, the god core forms a connection with your core and it lends you some of its power. When you heat the god core, you don't want to heat it with fire, because fire would remove the godly power from the core, which is a concept that was talked about in the last video, and it would be considered a great taboo to use fire like that anyway, so instead you have to use a sand bath, which works very well because sand is a godly material. Once you have a connection from the god core to your core, then to get the connection from your core to the god core, so that you can transfer your own core power into the god core, so that you can manipulate its power, you need to feed the god core with either some of your milk or with some of your blood. Blood is just filtered milk with retained life force and a small amount of bone. As a side note, we can tell there's still some bone in it because blood is the source of growth, and so since it feeds the growth of bones, it must retain some core power. In any case, blood or milk both are what lets you transfer your core power out of your bones and into the god core, which is what allows you to use its power. You feed the god core by covering it with some of the fluids. If you want to use your blood, you can cut a finger and then hold the god core in your hand, allowing the blood to contact the god core and then you can use it to perform the actions. So, combined with a milk drink to connect the godcore to you, this means that every time you want to perform an action, you'll need to drink some godcore warmed up milk and hold the godcore with a bloody finger/hand. The more you drink from the warmed up milk, and the more that you give the godcore from your blood/milk, the more you strengthen the connection between your bones and the godcore. Eventually, you'll have formed such a strong connection that you can stop spilling blood over it, because it knows you're connected. It becomes like a part of your own skeleton. There are even stories of great godcore users in history who drank so much milk and spilled so much blood and performed so many actions that at a certain point the godcore became permanently connected to them, such that no one else could even use it anymore. But for all intents and purposes, no matter how strong your connection with the godcore, you still have to hold it in your hands, or have some sort of physical contact with it when you want to perform an action with it, because even your bones that are a part of you still have to be in contact with you in order for you to use their core power. That being said, there are stories of some really powerful godcore users who bonded with their godcores to such an unimaginable extent that they're even said to have been able to perform actions without even being in contact with the godcore, but those may just be like fancy stories. Now, as I said before, to actually direct the core power, once you have a connection with the godcore, manipulating the godcore to perform actions would be exactly the same as manipulating your own core, i.e. your own bones, which is, to raise a hand, you kinda just do it. But just like a baby takes time to learn how to move its bones, so too, it takes time for a godcore user to learn how to accurately perform actions. And just like a baby will fall over constantly, you will make mistakes too. And since to actually use a godcore's power and perform some action with it, you have to remove some power from your own core and direct it to the godcore and then out, this means that performing actions actively makes your bones weaker, even if just by a little bit. So not being careful enough and giving out too much of your core power for a simple action, or performing really powerful actions with a godcore, will weaken your bones so much that they might end up just crumbling. So it can be really dangerous to start learning to perform actions, because you will make mistakes in the beginning. That being said, your core power does regenerate, so you don't damage your body permanently, but it regenerates slowly. So this means that, for the great majority of godcore users, they have a bunch of healed up bone fractures, like slight limps for example, because in their past they may have gone overboard and weakened their bones so much that they cracked it. Skilled godcore users watch how they perform actions very carefully. Now, just like when you move a hand, you move a different bone than when you move a leg, so too, when you manipulate the core power of a godcore, you have to pull core power from different sources of your body. Different actions require core power from different parts of your bones to be manipulated. For example, say some actions, let's say earthbending, is more of a hand power, and others, let's say summoning lightning, is upper spiny. So if you try to do an action in an incorrect way, like you didn't pull core power from the right bone, or you tried to do something you couldn't, or you strained too hard, that could lead to injuries that range from your bones actually crumbling, like I mentioned before, to minor uncomfortabilities, like a stiff neck, and similar types of uncomfortable feelings in your bones that a simple stretch or cracking of knuckles will fix. On the flip side, just like bad core power manipulation can cause stiff necks and the need to crack your joints, so too, stiff bones will make it harder for you to perform actions. If you wake up with a stiff neck, you'll have a hard time performing actions that day. This is because when your bones are stiff and aren't moving right or aren't in the right spot, it becomes harder to manipulate them, aka harder to perform actions through them. This leads me to the idea that cracking knuckles and visiting a chiropractor is a way to butter up your bones so it's easier to perform actions. In fact, not only does it make it easier to perform actions, it also acts like a power boost, because after getting good cracks in, you allow for the better flow of core power, which allows you to access some core power reserves you weren't able to tap in until now, because they were locked away behind the stiffness of the bone. Slowly your bones get back stiff, so after a while following a chiropractor visit, you'll begin to lose access to these reserves, but at the same time your body slowly over time recharges the core power, so as you're not using these reserves, they start filling back up, so by your next chiropractor visit, you'll once again be able to get that extra core power from that reserve. An extension of this idea, the one that I'm not sure I like so much, is that when you crack certain bones, it's like opening chi paths that allow you to perform certain actions, since different actions need power from different bones. Some actions may require one bone to be cracked open and another one to be closed, so you gotta consider carefully which one you crack and when. Like how I said before about how if, let's say, earthbending is more of a hand power, and summoning lightning is more upper spiny, then to earthbend you need to crack your hand to perform that action, And to summon lightning, you need to crack your upper spine to do that. Another route this idea can go down, which I even more so don't think I want for my setting, is that not only is cracking bones a way to allow the chi to flow better, but rather cracking knuckles is in fact the way to get the core power to flow to the proper locations. Meaning, instead of just being able to perform actions like how you just raise your own hand, it would be the cracking of your bones that is what carries out the action. Meaning, if we use Harry Potter as an analogy, the proper cracking of the proper bones would be like the proper waving of a wand. You know, like the flick and swish. It would be like a combination key of which bones you crack that releases the right spell. In fact, thinking about this now reminds me of the hand movements in Naruto. It could look like that, but instead of just moving your hands in funny shapes as in Naruto to move your bones in the right location, you would also be cracking specific knuckles in a specific order. But since it would look like somebody moving their hands in funny ways, cracking the right knuckles, and then a spell would be cast, I find it would look too silly for my setting, so I don't think I'll keep it. But it was still an interesting idea that came out from following the train of thought down to its different stations, so I'm still sharing it. Now, as I said before, since to actually use a godcore's power and perform some action with it, you have to remove some power from your own core and direct it to the godcore and then out, this means that performing actions actively makes your bones weaker. As I said before, this may make your bones just crumble if you're not careful. And I also mentioned that your core power does regenerate, but it does so slowly. So as a remedy to this, over the centuries, godcore users have come up with certain cocktails and foods that helps to regenerate your core power faster, and other cocktails that help to more easily and safely utilize your own core power and the godcore's power. And there's actually one particular cocktail I'll get into soon. There are also many trinkets crafted from godly materials that helps direct the core power in a safe way, though those make the actions come out a lot less powerful. Besides for physical objects, like these drinks and these trinkets, many methods of internal discipline for directing core power have also been developed over the centuries of godcore usage that allow core power to be safely controlled and directed. But it takes practice, as I said, and different types of godcore powers require different disciplines. So if you want to be a double major, it would take even more practice. Now, regarding the cocktails, as I said before, since any sufficiently advanced magic is indistinguishable from technology, they have a whole science on how to make these cocktails. There are different milk-based drinks with various spices and extra ingredients to get more or less power out of the godcores. For example, adding specific amounts of specific nail clippings can enhance the power because your nails are part of your core, and they represent power, as I said in the last episode, and they're very important theologically. Now, milk technically is not good for the godcore because it has air in it, so over time you do weaken the core every time you make another cocktail, but that's how you bridge it to your bones. And in fact, since we're talking about this, it would actually weaken the godcore a whole lot more if instead of warming up the godcore first and warming up the milk by that way, if you instead warm up the milk first and put a cold godcore into it to transfer some of its energy into the milk, because this would make the godcore heat up through the airy milk. So you're putting the air into the godcore more than just by putting the power of the godcore into the milk and letting it mix that way. That's why the most efficient way of getting the godcore power into the milk is by warming up the stone in a sand bath first and then putting the warm stone in cold milk. It keeps it fresh that way. Now there are rumors of godcore users in faraway lands who've perfected using fire to bridge the godcores with humans instead of using milk by creating smoke and breathing it in, which makes sense on a theoretical level since fire is also considered a connector of solids to air, and they say it gives shorter lasting but more powerful bursts of power. But the Eushirish would say that that could hardly be considered a humane way of treating such a divine object as a godcore, and it should never even be considered to be attempted in their civilized lands. But back to the milk cocktails, to get a bit dark, there is one particular cocktail that really works wonders in strengthening a person's core power and ability to manipulate godcore power. Since your core power comes from your bones, a long time ago someone had the idea to siphon power from other people's bones to strengthen their own core power, so they can do even more power-intensive actions. There are a few ideas on how to do this. The original crude method of doing this was they felt that in order to get power from other people's bones, you need their blood too, and you need to mix it with your blood, since blood is what lets you transfer core power out of one core and into another. So what they did was they had to kill a fresh person and remove the flesh and put the bones in a pool of its blood, and then the godcore user would cut their hand and put their hand into this pool, and then with the blood mixing, the godcore user can use the bone's power. So in this system, you couldn't just dig up dead bodies to help you use core power for a more powerful act, because you need the blood. Then they developed a much more efficient and clean method, and when I say developed, I mean with like research and stuff, because this is like a science after all. And in any case, they grind up the bones of a fresh dead person and mix it with the blood of that person, and then they drink it like a bone shake, as like an energy drink to make the actions be stronger. And later they developed more spices and ingredients to strengthen the effect, like anticoagulants. This doesn't require you to cut your own hand because it'll get your blood when it's in your own body anyway. And this way you can actually consume the bone mass, which will give you more of the core power than just having your blood suck a fraction of its power through a pool of blood. And an even more refined version of this is to create cookies out of the coagulated blood and ground up bones, and some edible dirt too, which is a thing by the way, look up geophagia, because it's easier to store cookies than liquid, and it's easier to create portions of cookies that have just the right amount of bones and blood that isn't too much or too little for you than for like liquid shakes. But even this whole development of the cookies and the shakes still requires fresh dead people. Now, I'm sure that the rules of the universe technically allow for you to use regular milk and bones, so you don't need to use fresh bodies and blood. But that science hasn't been discovered and invented yet. It would have to be very precisely done, so I don't think it would happen anytime soon anyway. Now, one caveat I thought for this magic system, but that I'm not entirely sure I want to keep, is that in this universe, it's not blood that's shared between family members, it's bones. Like, they don't say blood relatives, they say bone relatives. And so maybe only the line of the kings, or maybe the line of priests, which is an inherited position, have the special bones that allow you to use the godcore's power, and regular commoners don't. So not only are only the royals, or priests, the only ones who are able to perform the actions, but also, to make a bone shake you have to kill a fresh royal person specifically, not just anybody will do. I think I like this idea, but I don't really like the idea that only royals can perform the godcore power actions. So I think I should keep for myself a mix of the ideas. What I'm going to do is I'll say that the royal line has stronger bones, so the actions they perform are more powerful. And so using their bones to make a cookie is also more efficient than using commoner bones. But regular commoners can also perform actions. So this way I can say that people will go out of their way to kill royals, but it's not necessary, so this means that commoners can also rise up the ranks as like very powerful godcore users. Now, another caveat to this magic system is that historically, nobody would be killing people to have cookie mana energy shake type things, because even if everyone can do that actions, not just royals, you still need a godcore to perform any action anyway, and only like rich people like kings have them. So for a commoner to kill someone to eat their bones doesn't do them any good. And for the people who do have the godcores, they still wouldn't kill people because of taboo reasons, and also people would get mad at you. Also, even if bones from long dead people would work just as well as fresh bones, in this society when someone dies the entire body is burnt up in a very specific way I might make a video on sometime. So there's no threat of people digging up dead bodies to grab their bones because dead bodies aren't buried. And even if you can find bones and ashes, the act of burning up the bones removes its divinity, its core power. So it wouldn't help anyway. And for cultures that bury their dead, there can potentially be a belief that there's a reason why we bury bones underground, and you'll make a certain god unhappy if you just dig up bones. So nobody would want to do that either anyway, even for a power-up. I mean, I don't want to say nobody, because the whole point of this is that people will do it, that they'll kill people and make the shakes and cookies, but the point is that it's really, really rare. Now, another caveat to this magic system is that there's an upper limit to the strength of your actions besides for the strength of your connection to the godcore and to the supplemental shakes that you take, which is that it depends also on the power of the god whose godcore it is to begin with. Minor gods can only perform actions of so much power. Major gods can perform much more powerful actions. Now, for some godcores, by their nature of being godly, they're able to be powerful objects even without channeling through them your core power. An example of this is metal. Metal weapons are so strong because they're actual godcores. They carry within them a great power. Even if you don't channel any core power through them, the fact that they're of a powerful god makes it strong. iron is overpowered compared to bronze because it has the power of the stronger iron gods in it. One pro of using godcores in this plain way is that since you don't have to channel the core power to use its strength, you're not weakening your bones in any way by using it, so you're able to use them for long periods of time without any trouble, and you're able to have many average citizens utilize it too without having to train them how to safely control and channel core power, which is great for mobilizing armies. Now, just as an example of some historical godcore users and the feats that they were able to do, for a time long ago, there were many light god users due to the discovery of a graveyard of light gods that created an abundance of light god cores. One of these light god users developed a method and school of the manipulation of the power of the light gods. Through his teachings, light god users were able to summon these disembodied fluorescent lights in different shapes and colors, some lines and some dots, some red and some blue, and they were able to telepathically move them. It is believed to have been under their discretion which shape and color they produced. It seems that they created them out of thin air and decided how long they should exist. These lights were able to be used as both weapons, non-lethal as far as was recorded, and also just for displays of beauty. In one recorded occasion, a powerful user used a light to stick to a person and hold them in the air. Over time though, some light god cores were lost to time and others' core power slowly got used up, such that nowadays none exist anymore with any actual power. But if ever light god cores will be found again, then the books that were written on the manipulation of the power of light gods and all the discoveries that were made centuries ago when this was happening, it would come back into use. Another example of a godcore user is a very important historical figure I don't have time to go into today, but he was a very clever and powerful godcore user, and he set up a whole war to happen just so that he can come in afterwards, and with the help of one of his godcores, he turned all the bones into a single brick that, because of the sheer amount of bones that was condensed into this one brick, basically turned into a godcore of its own, but one that, instead of having a specific power, just functioned like a battery of core power that he could use for a near infinite amount of powerful actions without ever tiring his own bones. Since the brick became like a godcore, he used it in the same way he used the godcore. He made a connection between him and the brick just like he would between him and a godcore. He called his brick his jewel, and he carried it along with his regular godcores at all times. This legendized him as a person who pretty much created a synthetic godcore. Later powerful figures expanded on the theoretical science of this, creating a whole branch of study called jewel science, figuring out ways of combining godcores and special ingredients in the creation of such bricks to create actual synthetic godcores with novel abilities and powers, not just as a battery of core power, but they could never actualize these theories because of the sheer amount of bodies it would require, and eventually these books were banned and burned because of the moral implications of such science being out there. But perhaps one day they'll invent alternatives to bones for the creation of these synthetic godcores, and once they do that, then there will be the democratization of godcore power. Just as an aside, the reason why they don't feel bad using the godcores for their own benefits is because they believe that the gods created humans to be those that make use of the world and the things in it. Before humans, the gods had a whole world with nobody to do anything with it, so they were bored. The world was boring, and it was a waste to have all those resources just lying there. So they created humans, and their purpose is to go through the world and find things and make use of it. So it's not sacrilege to take a dead god's core and just use it for your own benefits. Now here's a funny turn of events. I came up with this magic system by following the logic of how gods work. I started by thinking that gods are strong rocks as opposed to weak wind. And following that, I thought of bones and humans being the spiritual center, and then that they can channel their core power to utilize the power of the gods. Then I thought, what's a convenient way of carrying the god core so that they can perform the actions without having to constantly hold a piece of rock? So I thought, oh, what if they fashioned the rock into a ring? But then I was like, that's way too similar to Green Lantern. So I thought, okay, so a bracelet. Then I thought, what if I want multiple god cores so I can perform multiple types of actions? How will they hold all the stones? So I thought, multiple bracelets? A crown? Or a necklace with many beads? And then I realized that there would be a whole bunch of people going on missions to collect as many powerful rocks as they can to gain power, and then I just recreated the Infinity Stones. Then, by following the train of thought through to the invention of the godcore battery jewel, I realized I kinda just stumbled my way into recreating the Philosopher's Stone from Fullmetal Alchemist. So this whole magic system has accidentally become Thanos Infinity Stones plus Fullmetal Alchemist Philosopher's Stone plus Mistborn Metal Swallowing and then plus Naruto Jutsu hand movements if you count that knuckle cracking code idea. What's the expression? There's nothing new under the sun? But I guess the lesson that I learned from this, the conclusion I came to after all of that, is that there is nothing new under the sun, and that's what I mean when I say world building juice. Everything that you see is inspiration for your own things. Yeah, sometimes you'll recreate something that looks very similar to something else, but that is what worldbuilding juice is. You see the juice, you take it, and then you make something new out of it, or something different. And that's what I'm doing here. So, keep the juices flowing.